I'm about to tell you something that will change the way you look at every office building you enter for the rest of your life. What I experienced in the Meridian Tower in downtown Chicago 3 months ago has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality, time, and the spaces we occupy every single day. My name is David, and I had been working as a financial analyst on the 8th floor of the Meridian Tower for 3 years. It's a standard 12-story office building, nothing particularly remarkable about it. Glass and steel construction from the 1980s, typical corporate environment. The kind of place where thousands of people just like me spend their days staring at computer screens and attending meetings that could have been emails. I want you to picture this building in your mind because the details matter. The Meridian Tower sits on the corner of LaSalle and Madison, right in the heart of Chicago's financial district. 12 floors of offices, ground floor lobby with marble floors, and that sterile corporate smell of cleaning products and recycled air. The elevator system was old but functional, 2 elevators serving all 12 floors, with buttons clearly marked from ground to 12. Let me know in the comments if you've ever noticed something strange about the elevators in your office building, because after what I'm about to tell you, you might start paying more attention. For 3 years, I rode those elevators twice a day, sometimes more. I knew every sound they made, every slight delay between floors, every quirk of the system. The left elevator had a slight jerk when it reached the 7th floor. The right elevator's button for the 9th floor sometimes needed to be pressed twice. These were the mundane details of my daily routine, the kind of things you notice when you do something hundreds of times. It was a Tuesday morning in September when everything changed. I remember the date exactly because it was the day after Labor Day, and the building felt different somehow. Quieter, more empty than usual. A lot of people were still on vacation, and the normal buzz of activity was missing. I arrived at work around 8:30 a.m., same as always. Swiped my badge at the lobby security desk, nodded to Marcus, the security guard I'd been greeting for 3 years, and headed toward the elevators. The left elevator was out of order. There was a handwritten "out of service" sign taped to the doors, so I waited for the right elevator. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the 8th floor. The elevator started its familiar ascent, and I was checking my phone when I noticed something odd. The floor indicator showed we were passing the 10th floor, then the 11th, then the 12th. But instead of stopping at the 8th floor like it should have, the elevator kept going up. I looked at the button panel, confused. I had definitely pressed 8. But the indicator now showed 13, floor 13, which was impossible because the Meridian Tower only has 12 floors. Hit the like button if this story is already giving you chills, because it gets so much worse. The elevator shuddered to a stop, and there was a soft ding as the doors opened. I stood there for a moment, completely bewildered. Through the open doors, I could see what looked like a normal office hallway. Beige carpet, fluorescent lighting, white walls with that standard corporate beige trim. But something felt wrong about it. The air was different, thicker, and there was complete silence. I should have pressed the button for the 8th floor again and gone down. That would have been the logical thing to do, but curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out of the elevator to take a quick look around, thinking maybe this was some kind of maintenance level or storage floor I hadn't known about. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with office doors, just like every other floor in the building. But the lighting was dimmer somehow, and the silence was absolute. No humming of computers, no muffled conversations, no sounds of typing or phones ringing, nothing. I walked to the nearest door and looked at the nameplate. Conference Room 13A. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. When I opened the door, what I saw inside made my blood run cold. There was a meeting going on. Around a long conference table sat 8 people in business attire. They were all looking at documents spread across the table, and one man at the head of the table was speaking in a low, measured voice. But here's the thing that made my heart start racing. They all looked wrong. Their clothes were outdated, like something from the 1990s. The woman closest to me was wearing a shoulder-padded blazer that looked like it came from a time capsule. But it wasn't just the clothes. Their faces looked faded, like old photographs that had been left in sunlight too long. Their skin had a grayish pallor, and their eyes seemed to reflect the fluorescent light in a way that human eyes shouldn't. The man at the head of the table was saying something about quarterly projections and market analysis, but his voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from very far away. None of them had noticed me standing in the doorway. I backed out of the room slowly, my hands shaking. I needed to get back to the elevator and get out of there, but when I turned around, the elevator doors were closed. I ran to them and pressed the call button repeatedly, but nothing happened. The elevator was gone. Comment below what you think was really happening here, because I'm still not sure I understand it myself. I tried to stay calm and think logically. Maybe there was a stairwell. I walked down the hallway, looking for an exit sign, but every door I passed was labeled as another conference room, 13B, 13C, 13D, and from behind each door I could hear the same thing. Muffled voices having meetings, discussing business matters in that same hollow, distant tone. I tried one more door, conference room 13E. This time, when I opened it, one of the people looked up at me. It was a woman with short, dark hair and that same faded appearance as the others. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that made every instinct in my body scream at me to run. "David," she said, and her voice echoed strangely in the small room. "We've been waiting for you. Please, take a seat." I slammed the door shut and ran. I didn't care about looking professional or maintaining my composure. I just ran down that hallway, trying every door I passed, looking for any way out. But every door led to the same thing. Conference rooms filled with those faded people having their eternal meetings. At the end of the hall, I found something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There was a bulletin board on the wall, the kind you see in every office building, but the notices pinned to it were all dated from the early 1990s. Meeting announcements, company memos, birthday party invitations, all from 1993. And then I saw something that made my blood freeze. There was a newspaper clipping pinned to the board. The headline read, "8 Meridian Tower employees die in elevator accident." The date was September 15th, 1993, exactly 30 years ago. I read the article with growing horror. 8 employees of Harrison and Associates, a financial consulting firm that had offices on the 13th floor of the Meridian Tower, had died when their elevator malfunctioned and plummeted to the ground floor. The article mentioned that they had been working late on a major presentation when the accident occurred. But here's the thing that made me realize the true horror of my situation. There was no 13th floor in the Meridian Tower. The building had been constructed with only 12 floors. The accident had happened on what should have been an impossible floor. Let me know in the comments if you've experienced something similar, because I need to know I'm not losing my mind. I heard footsteps behind me and turned around. The woman from conference room 13E was walking toward me, her smile still fixed on her face. But now I could see that her eyes were completely black, like empty holes in her faded face. "David," she said again, "the meeting is about to start. We need a financial analyst. We've been waiting so long for someone with your qualifications." I backed away from her, pressing myself against the bulletin board. "I don't understand what's happening here." "What do you want from me?" "We want you to join us," she said, and her voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once. "We've been working on this project for 30 years. We're so close to finishing it. We just need one more person to complete the team." "You're all dead," I whispered. "You died 30 years ago." Her smile widened, and I could see that her teeth were gray and decaying. "Death is just another kind of meeting, David, and this meeting never ends." I heard more footsteps, and I realized that the other people from the conference rooms were coming out into the hallway. All of them had that same faded appearance, those same black eyes, that same horrible smile. They were all walking toward me slowly, methodically, like they had all the time in the world. Because they did. I was trapped on a floor that didn't exist, with people who had been dead for 30 years, and they wanted me to join their eternal meeting. I could feel panic rising in my chest, but I forced myself to think there had to be a way out. There had to be. I remembered the elevator. It had brought me here, so it had to be able to take me back. I ran past the approaching figures, ignoring their calls for me to stop, to join them, to take my place at the table. I reached the elevator doors and pressed the call button frantically. Nothing happened. I pressed it again and again, but the elevator didn't come. I could hear the dead employees getting closer, their footsteps echoing in the hallway. I was going to be trapped here forever, forced to attend their never-ending meeting, discussing quarterly projections and market analysis for all eternity. But then, I heard something that gave me hope. The soft ding of the elevator arriving. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more terrifying true stories like this one. The doors opened, and I threw myself inside, pressing the button for the 8th floor, my real floor, the floor where I belonged. The doors closed just as the woman reached them, her faded hand pressed against the glass, her black eyes staring at me with disappointment. The elevator began to descend, and I watched the floor indicator with desperate attention. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. The doors opened, and I stumbled out into the familiar hallway of my actual office floor. Everything was normal. The sounds of office life, typing, phone calls, conversations, filled the air. My co-workers were at their desks, going about their usual routines. I looked back at the elevator, but it showed no sign of what had just happened. The floor indicator showed 8, like it always did. I went to my desk and sat down, trying to process what I had experienced. Had it been real? Had I actually been on a floor that didn't exist, talking to people who had died 30 years ago? Or had I suffered some kind of mental breakdown? I decided to do some research. I spent my lunch break looking up information about the Meridian Tower, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. The building had indeed been constructed with 13 floors originally, but after the elevator accident in 1993, the 13th floor had been sealed off and removed from the building's official floor plan. The families of the victims had sued, claiming that the floor was cursed and the building's owners had agreed to eliminate it from the structure. But apparently, eliminating it from the plans and eliminating it from reality were two different things. I also found something else. Over the years, there had been reports from other employees in the building about strange elevator malfunctions, people getting off on floors that didn't exist, hearing voices from empty conference rooms, seeing shadowy figures in the hallways. But these reports had always been dismissed as stress-related hallucinations or pranks. I wasn't the first person to visit floor 13, and I probably wouldn't be the last. For the rest of that day, I avoided the elevators. I took the stairs to and from my office, even though it meant climbing 8 flights. I couldn't bear the thought of stepping into that elevator again, of risking another trip to that impossible floor. But avoiding the elevators forever wasn't practical. I worked on the 8th floor of a 12-story building. Eventually, I was going to have to use them again. The next morning, I arrived at work with a plan. I would only use the left elevator, the one that had been out of service the day before. If the right elevator was the one that had taken me to floor 13, then the left one should be safe. I waited for the left elevator, and when it arrived, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the 8th floor. The elevator rose smoothly, stopping at each floor as it should. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The doors opened, and I stepped out onto my floor with relief. This worked for about a week. I only used the left elevator, and I never had any problems. I started to convince myself that what I had experienced was some kind of isolated incident, a one-time malfunction that wouldn't happen again. But the dead employees of Floor 13 weren't done with me. Share your own paranormal experiences in the comments section, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. It was the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my first visit to Floor 13, when I made a horrible discovery. I was riding the left elevator up to my floor, feeling safe and secure, when I noticed something that made my heart stop. The elevator was ascending past the 8th floor. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The same soft ding, the same opening doors, the same dimly lit hallway with its beige carpet and fluorescent lighting. But this time, I didn't step out. I pressed the button for the 8th floor repeatedly, trying to get the elevator to go back down. But the doors remained open, and I could hear something that filled me with dread. Footsteps, multiple sets of footsteps, coming down the hallway toward the elevator. I pressed the closed door button frantically, but nothing happened. The elevator seemed to be frozen, trapped between floors, just like I was trapped between worlds. The footsteps got closer, and I could hear voices now. The same hollow, distant voices I had heard during my first visit. They were calling my name. David. David, the meeting is about to start. David, we've been waiting for you. David, you can't avoid us forever. I closed my eyes and pressed every button on the elevator panel, hoping that something would work, that the elevator would respond and take me away from this nightmare. I could feel cold air flowing into the elevator from the hallway, and I could smell something terrible, the smell of decay and old paper, and something else I couldn't identify. When I opened my eyes, the woman from conference room 13E was standing in the elevator doorway, her black eyes fixed on me, her grey smile wider than ever. "Hello again, David," she said. "We missed you at last week's meeting." I pressed myself against the back wall of the elevator, my hands shaking. "Leave me alone. I don't want to be part of your meeting." "But you're already part of it," she said, stepping into the elevator. "You've been part of it since the moment you first stepped onto our floor. We've been waiting 30 years for someone like you, someone who can help us finish our work." "What work?" I whispered. "The Harrison project," she said. "We were so close to completing it when we died. The quarterly projections, the market analysis, the financial modeling. We had everything ready for presentation, but we never got the chance to finish it. We've been working on it ever since, David. 30 years of meetings, 30 years of analysis, 30 years of waiting for the right person to help us complete it." I realized then that this wasn't just about me being trapped on floor 13. These dead employees had been trapped there for 30 years, doomed to continue their work forever, unable to rest until their project was complete. And somehow, my presence had given them hope that they could finally finish what they had started. "But why me?" I asked. "Because you're a financial analyst," she said. "Just like Harrison was, just like we were. You have the skills we need, the knowledge we need. You can help us finish the project and finally move on. Let me know if you want a part 2 to this story, because what happened next will haunt me forever." I looked at this woman, this thing that had once been a woman, and I made a decision that probably saved my life. Instead of trying to run, instead of trying to fight, I decided to try to understand. "What exactly do you need me to do?" I asked. Her smile became less threatening, more hopeful. "Come to conference room 13A. Look at our work. Help us find the error in our calculations. We've been going over the same numbers for 30 years, and we know there's something wrong, but we can't see it. We need fresh eyes." I followed her out of the elevator and down the hallway to conference room 13A. The other dead employees were there, sitting around the table just as I had first seen them. Their faded faces turned toward me as I entered, and I could see a desperate hunger in their black eyes. The conference table was covered with papers, financial reports, spreadsheets, charts, and graphs. All of it looked like it had been printed on dot matrix printers from the early 1990s. The numbers were faded like everything else on this floor, but I could still read them. I sat down at the table, and one of the dead employees, a man in a grey suit with thinning hair, handed me a stack of papers. "These are the quarterly projections for the Harrison account," he said in that same hollow voice. "We've been trying to balance the portfolio for 30 years, but something's wrong. The numbers don't add up." I looked at the papers and immediately I could see the problem. It wasn't a complex error. It was actually quite simple. They had been using an outdated calculation method for compound interest, something that would have been standard in 1993, but had been superseded by more accurate formulas years ago. "I can fix this," I said. The dead employees leaned forward eagerly. "You can?" "Yes, but I need to use modern calculations. The methods you're using are outdated." I spent the next hour working with them, showing them the correct formulas, helping them recalculate their projections. It was surreal, sitting in a conference room that didn't exist, helping dead people finish a project that had been started 30 years ago. But as we worked, I began to understand something important. These people weren't evil. They weren't trying to hurt me or trap me. They were just lost, trapped in a loop of unfinished business, unable to move on because they had died with their work incomplete. They had been having the same meeting for 30 years, going over the same numbers, trying to find an error they couldn't see because they were using the knowledge and methods available to them in 1993. When we finished the calculations and the numbers finally balanced, something amazing happened. The dead employees' faces began to change. The faded grayish pallor started to fade, and for just a moment they looked like real people again. The woman who had been speaking to me smiled, a real smile this time, not the horrible grimace I had seen before. "Thank you," she said, and her voice sounded human again. "We can finally rest." One by one, they began to fade away, becoming transparent, and then disappearing entirely. The conference room around me started to dissolve, the walls becoming less solid, the fluorescent lights dimming. I realized that floor 13 was finally being laid to rest. I ran back to the elevator, and this time it was waiting for me, doors open. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the 8th floor. As the doors closed, I looked back at the hallway one last time. It was empty now, just a fading echo of what it had been. The elevator descended normally. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. The doors opened onto my familiar office floor, and I stepped out into the world of the living. That was 3 months ago. I still work in the Meridian Tower, and I use the elevators regularly now. The left elevator, the right elevator, it doesn't matter. Neither of them stops at floor 13 anymore. The dead employees have moved on, their work finally complete. But sometimes, late at night when I'm working overtime, I think I can hear the faint sound of a meeting in progress somewhere in the building. Voices discussing quarterly projections and market analysis. And I wonder if there are other floors in other buildings where similar meetings are taking place, where other dead employees are trapped in eternal conferences, waiting for someone to help them finish their work. The next time you're in an elevator in an office building, pay attention to the floor indicator. If it stops at a floor that shouldn't exist, if you hear voices from empty conference rooms, if you see people in outdated business attire having meetings that started decades ago, remember my story. Sometimes the dead just need help finishing what they started. Sometimes the most terrifying supernatural encounter is also an act of compassion. And sometimes, helping the dead find peace is the only way to save yourself from joining their eternal meeting. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any supernatural content, and share this video with someone who loves horror stories. Because there are more buildings out there, more floors that don't exist, more meetings that never end. The question is, will you have the courage to help when your turn comes?